Hi, and welcome to the first episode of the DigiTeacher Podcast for 2024. It's been a bit of a gap, but I'm back, and I'd like to change the content and format of the podcast for this year. So I'd like to keep the teacher interviews. I think those are very valuable to hear what teachers have to say about the profession. And I'd like to keep some of my opinion pieces. I still have some opinions that I would like to share, but I'd like to shift the focus more to academic research and what the research can tell us about practice in the classroom. The practice particularly of computer education, but teaching generally, and IT integration, the use of technology in the classroom. I'd also like to have a lot more kind of hands-on sessions, for example, microbit education for kind of middle school, junior school, and having a look at practical projects and things like that. So I'd like to produce a lot more content this time, and some of it more directly focused towards computer education professionals, and some of it a bit more general. And I'd like to kind of pick up on that theme of generalism by looking at the place of computer education within the curriculum. I think I'm coming kind of back circle to the question I asked right at the beginning of this podcast, of this channel. So, why do we teach computer education? I mean, at one level, the answer seems pretty obvious, because computers are important in the world. They're of increasing importance, and there's barely a profession now where computing is not involved in some way or another, or computation is not involved in some way or other. And quite clearly the ability to use computers is absolutely vital. And yet computer education seems to have swung, the pendulum seems to have swung away from kind of general computer literacy or computer application skills, what was called in some countries ICTs, towards more teaching of computer science to a wider range of students. So I guess the first question we need to untangle is, who needs computer education? Quite clearly there's a space for computer science in the curriculum, but is it just for specialists, people who are going to go on to become computer scientists? Much like I believe there's a space for history in the curriculum, but no one becomes historians really, very few, but does it have an impact on our general understanding of society, and is it therefore a very useful core foundational subject? So I would like to try and unpack some of those issues around computer education. Is the swing towards teaching more computer science something that we need, or do we need to hang on to more of those kind of a basic ICT skills, computer literacy skills, ability to use applications? So let's try and unpack that a little bit. This Venn diagram comes from the Raspberry Pi organization report in about 2014, looking at the state of computer education in the UK. And remember that there was this kind of swing of the pendulum from mainly teaching ICTs and kind of ignoring computer science towards a curriculum more focused on computer science. And they try and kind of bring it together as a unified whole. And a lot of the work done by the Raspberry Pi organization has been aimed at kind of pushing the synthesis of a curriculum. And I think it's very valuable. But while coding and increasingly robotics has been taking over the space in schools, I think the baby is being thrown out with the bathwater. To a large extent, there is less and less time within the curriculum for those kind of traditional computer applications. So Word, Excel, databases. And those are really foundational computer literacy skills, and they're really not being taught. There seems to be this kind of assumption that, the digital native argument, that if you're born after a certain date, you have this natural ability with computers. You don't need to learn it because you kind of got it. And nothing could be further than the truth. No one learns spreadsheets from the ether. You have to put in a lot of effort to learn how to make a spreadsheet yourself, or you have to be taught how to make a spreadsheet. And the vast majority of students are not going to put in any effort to learn geeky things like spreadsheets. And yet not being able to make a spreadsheet, I think, is a huge pity. It's a big gap in one's computing skills. So somehow we have to kind of address the balance. I'm not arguing that the drift towards more and more coding, more and more robotics isn't important. We need to be doing that. But we need to be hanging on to those core foundational ICT skills as well, computer applications. In South Africa, in the high school, from grade 10 to matric, you can take one of two computing subjects. So neither of them are compulsory, but they can be taken. The one is called CAT, Computer Applications Technology, and that focuses on applications. So it's Word, Excel, databases, within the theory, hardware, software, networking, so kind of basic knowledge of computing systems. Or you can take information technology, which includes the coding in Delphi or Java and the theory, hardware, software, networking, and so on. So those are two courses that students can take. So in South Africa, they are attempting to introduce a coding and robotics syllabus from foundation phase, a grade R, reception, all the way to through intermediate phase to the senior phase, grade 8 and 9. And the syllabus looks good on paper. It includes computational thinking, algorithms, coding, robotic skills, basic kind of internet and computer literacy applications. So on the face of it, that's all in good. You're getting that integration with applications, learning spreadsheets, Word, basic computer literacy. You're learning some of the theory, Boolean operators, truth tables, all of those kind of foundational skills for preparing for computer science as a subject, if that's where you're going, or to give this kind of general knowledge that most citizens will need in the world going forward about computers and how they operate. So it's all well and good, except it is enormously impractical. The time allocated per week is simply not enough to be able to pursue such an ambitious syllabus, given that students have other foundational skills that they need to take care of. Reading, writing, arithmetic. What is this replacing? Is it pushing the arts out? In which case, I would say no. we can't go down that route. Computing should not be replacing the arts. It should not be replacing the humanities either. So there is a kind of pinch point. There's just not enough time in the day, and we don't want to extend the day and become this sort of monstrous educational system which takes over people's lives and gives them absolutely no time for downtime and the kind of time to assimilate and take on board all that they've been learning. So how do you accomplish all of this given the fact that there's no money in the country, there's often no electricity, there's certainly not the computing equipment, and I don't think there's the teachers either. So as ambitious and beautiful as this curriculum sounds, it is vastly impractical. And I think in many countries, the same constraints exist in one form or another. In the UK, for example, they talk about a shortage of teachers, and well, that's compounded in our country where even something as basic as electricity and internet access is going to block that for most schools in the country. A few schools will be able to achieve this curriculum, but then the question is, at what expense? So I think we need to kind of go back and try to look at the why question. Why do we want to learn computing? So should every student be learning it? It makes sense to me to argue yes. Everyone needs an exposure to computing. So when should it be introduced then? should it start in reception phase as they are talking about, or maybe this should be later, but in which case you've got a real pinch on how much you can cram into the syllabus. And I don't know if there's kind of any easy answers to any of this. Why do we want to teach computing? I think part of it is that if we imagine a future in which computation, in which artificial intelligence is pretty much the sea we swim in, the air that we breathe, everyone needs to have not just a facility with being able to operate a world of AI, a world of dominated by information technology and data, but we need also to have a sense of agency in that world. Undoubtedly AI will be powerful enough pretty soon to be able to create all the programs and things that we need, but that leaves the human beings out of the equation. So is coding and robotics ultimately, and computing ultimately, just to become a kind of consumer thing that we know how to like and share, and what buttons to press on the machine to get it to work? Hey Siri, get this to work for me, kind of thing. Or are we to retain our agency? Will computing go the way of Latin and history in the curriculum? I hope not, because I think one thing that learning to program, learning to code does give students is a sense of agency. If you can program a machine, you don't feel helpless in the face of the machine. If you don't, I think your attitude is pretty much, well, if it doesn't work, there's nothing I can do about it. And that, I think, is a great limiting factor. So Latin was seen as core in the curriculum in the 1800s, for private school boys who were going to go out and rule the British Empire. And it was foundational because it gave them a sense of the superiority of Western culture. They learnt the Greek and Roman mythology and outlook on the world, which gave them a sense of superiority of their own culture, and was an excluding factor. So if you didn't have the brains to do Latin and Greek, then you probably didn't have the brains to go out and rule an empire. But then if you passed that, you could be safely sent out, knowing that you had the skills and the outlook necessary to rule an empire. Almost said ruin an empire. That's closer to the truth. And I don't argue for that, obviously, but I think IT could fulfill a similar role if it gives us a sense of agency, that we are going out into a world dominated by machines that by and large we don't understand. We don't even understand how they work. Artificial intelligence, for example, operates on neural networks. It's a black box. We don't know why it does what it does. We're just amazed that ChatGPT is as good as it is and often as bad as it is. We have to have a sense of human control and human agency. And I think learning some coding and robotics gives us a sense of that control, gives us a sense of our place in the world, that we are still in command. We don't just throw up our hands and give up. So I think IT should be a foundational subject for those reasons, that we learn how to operate computers, and we are able to run databases, do our own spreadsheets, and have a sense of agency that way. We don't palm it off on AI to run our lives, and B, that we have an ability to program. If a machine breaks down, we can tinker with the engineering, for example. We can tinker with the software as well, and we have that level of control over our lives going forward. I think the attitude behind it is what is crucial. To program a microbit is not that important going forward in the world, because machines will be able to do most of the coding and so forth. But knowing that we can, I think, gives you an advantage in a world of machines. So if the problem is that we want to have coding and robotics, we want to have computational thinking, we want to have computer applications as well in the syllabus, and we want it for everybody, but there's no time in the syllabus, in the curriculum, how do we solve that problem? I think it will take a great deal of creativity, and I think one of the problems is that it will actually take a lot of integration. So, for example, if you have a problem-based learning approach in a school, the big problem with problem-based learning is, as with kind of all interdisciplinary things, you can't do interdisciplinary before you have a discipline. What knowledge do you have to solve problems? You've got to gain some knowledge. So that there is an issue of we need to have foundational disciplinary knowledge introduced at times in the syllabus. There are times when you can integrate within problems, and maybe you can make up some space that way. So a lot of the application of skills that you're learning could be in a kind of more general and cross-disciplinary problem-based approach type of scenario. All of that means that teachers need to work together. So you need computer teachers who are able to, not just think with that hat. They need to be able to integrate with the arts, with the humanities, and so on. And you need geography teachers, or you need maths teachers who are able to integrate with, the computational thinking and the coding and robotics. All of that needs time to develop. So teachers need time within any context, within any school, to develop effective programs that bring these things into the curriculum in a way which doesn't extend the school day hopelessly by adding on just extra hours for all the extra stuff that we want to do. I think it's an enormous problem, but it is a problem in detail. It's a problem in practice that needs to be unpacked. So I would argue that throughout, primary school, foundation phase, intermediate, senior phase, throughout that kind of junior school and middle school, certainly, you need a lot more of an approach of, we're going to give you a unit of work now, we're going to teach you spreadsheets, and then we're going to use the spreadsheet to work with other content areas in a problem-based approach or a research-based approach or whatever approach that you're taking. And if I think if we start to take that kind of approach of providing enough disciplinary knowledge so that cross-disciplinary studies, research studies, problem-based learning can occur, and you give the time for that kind of cross-pollination of the arts, the humanities, computing, etc., I think we've got a chance, but it is enormously difficult to do. And about the resources problem, well, how do you overcome a lack of resources? That problem, is a different issue. There's a lot you can do with unplugged computing. So you don't necessarily need a computer, but I think it would be ridiculous to imagine offering computing in your curriculum and then not having any computers at all. But you can certainly do resource sharing. Maybe there needs to be a lot more of a kind of extramural approach, perhaps with limited resources, which are maybe touring the country. So several schools could be sharing resources, and they could be sharing those resources with the community as well. So after hours, it's largely used by the community. During school hours, it's used by school kids. So I think there are ways of approaching problems of limited resources. And of the problem of trying to fit everything in. But I have to admit that it is a very complicated problem to try and unpack. Teachers are used to operating in silos. They're used to having control over what they're doing, and we're not very good collaborators often. And very often, in some ways that's a good thing, because it means students are getting solid disciplinary skills that they need, rather than kind of more airy-fairy approach where what knowledge a student's getting is a little bit more uncertain, and some may be getting it, but others might not be getting it. We need to be marrying disciplinary studies with solid foundational knowledge in computing or in the arts or in the humanities or whatever it is, together with more problem-based approaches, allowing us to integrate those skills more. And it's a challenge, and I think that's the challenge that I would like to leave you, with thinking about. I hope this episode has been valuable in some way. It certainly allowed me to think through some of the things that have been swirling around in my head for about a decade or so. If I think about my own journey, when I arrived at the school where I teach now, I was shown a filing cabinet full of Excel spreadsheet exercises, and I looked at them and they were dry, they were disconnected from the world, and I thought, this is going to turn everyone, especially it's going to turn girls off of computing. So I brought in things like Photoshop, I brought in more graphic arts, I started bringing in coding, so using JavaScript, using ActionScript to create flash games, and to try and keep the syllabus more abreast with the changes in the world as we move to more coding and robotics orientated computer education. I still tried to keep the applications, we still did spreadsheets, we still did databases, but over the years it became increasingly difficult to fit that into the limited time, usually about an hour a week, that I was given with students. And an hour a week is quite generous. In many schools don't have that at all. And this year is the first year that I'm not teaching any computer applications. So what I'm thinking of doing is to move that online and to say, here are computer applications courses that you can do online, and maybe make them compulsory for all students to do as a kind of in your own time over the course of 2 years or so, you need to have completed these courses. And I think that's another approach we have to look at. One way of putting everything we need into the curriculum might be to incorporate online learning as well. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please like, please share, and please leave comments. I'd like to have a debate around all of these issues. So if you agree or you disagree, please leave a comment in the channel. And I'll see you next time on the DigiTeacher Podcast.